Hi, I'm Michael, and this is California. And yesterday we got some interesting news from unemployment that showed that the unemployment rate was actually much smaller than anybody had predicted, which is great news. It means lots of people are getting back to work, but it could spell doom for another potential stimulus check. Additionally, we got some information about the PPP program and some new flexibilities that just got passed that allowed small business owners to make changes and use the money differently than they previously could have. So today we're going to talk about what Republicans, what Democrats, and what Trump are saying about a next stimulus check, as well as what are some of those changes to the PPP program. Now, before we do that, if you like this information, if you find it interesting, you find it helpful, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you can get updates when our newest and most informative videos become available. All right, so let's first talk about some of the changes that happened on Friday to the PPP program. And there was a rule passed in the Senate that allowed more flexibility for small businesses to utilize the $2.2 trillion that we all received on their small business. So, for example, some of the main things that got changed were the amount of money that had to be spent on payroll versus how much could be spent on overhead. So things like lights or rent and those kinds of things. So previously it was at 75% had to be spent on payroll, and 25% could be spent on other things. Now it got changed to 60% could be spent on payroll and 40% could be spent on other things like overhead and utilities and all those other kinds of things. Additionally, the amount of time that we had to spend the money got extended. So it went from 8 weeks up to 24 weeks. And so that's going to allow a lot of businesses a lot more flexibility to continue to employ employees, but also to have a little bit more time to ensure that the money that they received is going to be forgivable. And the PPP is one of the big reasons that President Trump is saying that the unemployment numbers have been much lower than they were initially anticipated, because of the fact that it allowed lots of small businesses to keep on employees who maybe would not have been justified unless these businesses had been getting subsidized. I know it had really helped us be able to keep our employees on even when things were a little slowed down. Now, furthermore, Trump is saying that he'd like to do more for small businesses. For example, to bring back a payroll tax holiday, or even allow spending on entertainment or restaurants to be tax deductible. So there's a lot of interesting things happening over the next couple months, and I'd love to see what Trump is going to do to help out small businesses, as well as those restaurants and those businesses that have been shut down, to ensure that the economy gets back up and running and people can stay employed as long as possible. Now, the question is going to be, what is that going to look like once all the PPP funding ends? Once that stimulus ends, is there going to be a spike in unemployment? We'll just have to wait and see if that happens. All right, so let's talk about stimulus checks and Republicans. So obviously, Republicans are trying to figure out ways to avoid having another huge stimulus check, especially considering the fact that the lockdown already has a bill of trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. Now, obviously, they are looking at other ways to get money out to folks, and that would primarily be through state and local governments and existing programs, so like Medicaid or Medi-Cal or SNAP or food stamps or unemployment, rather than taking a shotgun approach and just giving money out to the populace in totality like a stimulus check. And really, they have a much stronger position today as a result of the better than expected unemployment rate numbers, as well as the decreasing pandemic numbers. It really puts them in a position where they don't have to really choose a stimulus check. A lot of that momentum for another stimulus package has died down. And when asked about it, Senator Mitt Romney said the potentiality of a stimulus check is unlikely, as well as Lindsey Graham, who's saying that he has not much enthusiasm for another stimulus check. And again, they are in a strong position to do this, at least for the time being. I say that because there's not taking into account the possibility of a second wave of unemployment, as well as a second wave of pandemic, mainly because the PPP money, which really helped to keep so many folks employed over the last couple months, that money is going to run out over the next couple weeks and months. And what that means is that if there is not the demand for small businesses to have those employees, those folks are going to get laid off, bringing a second wave of unemployment. As well as the winter months come and things get a little bit colder, it's possible there could be a second wave for the pandemic. So if those two things happen, of course, there might be a need for another round of stimulus checks and another round of lockdowns and all that kind of stuff that we just came through. But for the time being, it looks like they're in a strong position, and we'll just kind of have to wait and see what the future holds for all of us. So let's talk about Democrats and stimulus checks. And as you would think, that there are lots of Democrats who want large, all-encompassing stimulus checks, like something that was proposed through the HEROES Act. But there are still more centrist and conservative Democrats who, in an election year, have to show that they are fiscally responsible, are looking for responses that are more targeted rather than just helicopter money that's flown over cities and dropped out indiscriminately. They're looking at ways to get money and resources out to people through more traditional means. So things like state and local governments, unemployment agencies, Medicaid, Medi-Cal, or SNAP, so that those folks who really do need it can be vetted and get the resources they need to help them through this lockdown. Because when we look at the numbers, unemployment going down, pandemic going down, and states opening back up, there really isn't as much of a need, and it may not be fiscally responsible to have $3.3 trillion passed to go out to folks who maybe don't need it as much. And then also, it really does mean that people need to get back to work, because stimulus checks are not a long-term solution to this problem. People cannot be on stimulus checks for years on end and have our economy be able to get back to work, but it's not. Now, some of the most interesting proposals are ones where the benefits are attached to unemployment rates. So as the unemployment rate goes down, people get less and less unemployment benefits, which would make sense since people are getting back to work. And it would really be a hindrance to our economy to help people stay unemployed when they could actually get back to work and be productive again. So it's great to see that Democrats are out there at least trying to temper a little bit, not saying that there's not going to be any more stimulus checks, but try to make sure that the approach is more targeted and efficient rather than just kind of an all-encompassing massive amount of cash dump. That would be great for everybody. I'd love to get additional money, but really I'd much rather have that money go to folks who really need it than folks who maybe don't need it but would be nice to have. So overall, I am really encouraged to see both the Republicans and Democrats essentially agreeing, but just disagreeing on how much and when, but how additional resources should get out to those folks who need them most, obviously through state and local entities and through traditional means like Medi-Cal and Medicaid and SNAP and unemployment and those kinds of benefits. Also, additionally, obviously, it's going to be necessary to get everyone back to work. So even though we are not out of the woods yet, there is still a light at the end of the tunnel. States are opening back up, unemployment is going down, and the pandemic numbers are going down, which means there's a lot of promise for us to get back to where we were before. The question is just going to be how to do it and whether it's the right amount of money to do it. But one thing seems certain and agreed on both sides is that large amounts of money just indiscriminately distributed don't seem to be the best way to do it moving forward. Now, that could change if there is a second wave of unemployment, if there is a second wave of lockdowns, if there's a second wave of pandemic that happens, that may change in the near future. But in lieu of any of those kinds of things, I am very heartened to see how both sides seem to be working together, even though they seem to say that they are disagreeing with each other, but essentially saying the same thing and having the same perspective, which means that there's a large possibility that we might actually be able to get something passed and through to help us all get back to work and get back on our feet in totality, even if we are starting to do so now. Thank you so much for watching our video, and I hope that you found it interesting or helpful or at least useful. And if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you can get updates when our newest and most informative videos become available. Also, if you have any comments, you have any questions, leave them down below. We love to see your comments and questions, and we'll be happy to make a new video or a new post to answer them as soon as we can. Now, finally, we here at California, we know health insurance. So whether it's Covered California or Medicare or Medicaid or Medi-Cal or private health insurance or health insurance for a small group, we know health insurance. So if you have any questions about that, you can leave those down below. We'll be happy to make a new video or post for those as well. Now, other than that, I am Michael, and this is California, wishing you a happy, healthy day.